Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. I didn't even want to get out of the car. The last time I stepped foot in this building, my name was still printed on the door of my office. Back then, people used to greet me with excitement in their voice. Now, I was just a visitor with a paper badge and a hollow feeling in my gut. My name is Adira Vale. I'm 41 years old, and for the past 10 years, I've been a ghost in my own hometown, San Mateo, California. The lobby of ValeNet was bigger than I remembered, sleeker, more glass, more marble. Security scanned my visitor badge without a word. No one recognized me. That was the point, I guess. They made sure of that a decade ago. I followed the crowd into the main auditorium where the promotion ceremony was being held. Evan's name was everywhere. Banners, slideshows, digital displays announcing him as the new lead engineer. At 33, he was being crowned the future of ValeNet. I found a seat near the back, far enough away to be forgotten, close enough to see my brother step on stage and give his practiced speech. I hadn't told anyone I was coming. Not Evan, not my parents. I wasn't here to make a scene. I just needed to see for myself who they let inherit the throne I was forced to walk away from. The lights dimmed, and a quiet hush spread through the crowd. On stage stood 4 people: a VP from product, the current CTO, Evan himself, and someone I hadn't expected to see again. Professor Anthony Markel, the man who once called me the best raw talent he'd ever taught. He stood tall in a gray sport coat, thinner now, but still sharp. He started reading from a tablet, listing Evan's credentials: prestigious internships, quantum security work, published white papers, the usual noise. Then he paused. I saw it before anyone else did. The moment his eyes met mine, I didn't move. I couldn't. Markel stepped away from the podium. He walked down the stairs of the stage slowly, like he had all the time in the world. The audience shifted, murmuring. Something wasn't right. This wasn't planned. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He walked straight toward me and stopped just a few feet away. And then he nodded. Not a casual nod. Not a hello. A deliberate public nod of respect. The kind that people in this company reserved for legends. I felt hundreds of eyes turn. It was like someone dropped a pin in a room full of glass. I could feel it breaking. The polite silence that had buried my name. The story they told about me wasn't adding up anymore. Not after this. Markel turned and walked back to his seat in the front row. The ceremony continued. Evan gave his speech. People clapped. But the room had changed. They saw me now, and no one could pretend I hadn't been part of this story all along. Back then, I still believed raising the alarm would matter. I was 30 years old. At the time, the youngest security engineer ever placed on a live corporate simulation team. It was supposed to be a high-pressure exercise to test the company's firewall response, routine, controlled, confidential. But less than 2 hours into the drill, I noticed anomalies that didn't fit the mock attack patterns. They were small at first, buried deep in the access logs. Failed login attempts from servers outside our mapped infrastructure. Minor keystroke delays that didn't match the test parameters. I flagged it, wrote up a report, tagged it with an internal red flag. Nobody listened. It's probably just residual code from the last sim run, one of the senior architects said, barely glancing at my screen. You're overanalyzing. But I wasn't. Something was wrong, and I knew it. The next morning, I skipped protocol and took the data straight to my supervisor. That was my first mistake. Within hours, the story had shifted. I was told to step away from the simulation for rest. My access was paused, my report was buried. Then the breach happened, a real one, during the simulation window. Whoever it was got inside and vanished without a trace, leaving nothing but fragmented script patterns and a perfectly timed exit. It was brilliant, terrifying but brilliant, and still, they pinned it on me. Officially, it was failure to follow escalation protocol. Unofficially, it was my supposed instability. The whisper campaign started fast. Words like paranoid and emotionally reactive were passed around in hushed tones. The official postmortem report concluded that my behavior compromised internal cohesion and escalated risk unnecessarily. I remember sitting in that sterile boardroom, across from 3 men and 1 woman in sharp suits. Gareth Vale, my father and the chief operations officer, sat at the head of the table. He didn't look at me. They asked if I wanted to dispute the findings. I didn't, because by then, I already knew what was coming. Gareth had signed off on the final version of the breach review himself, the one that quietly removed all traces of my warning, edited the timestamps, reshaped the narrative. He called it damage control. We have to protect the company's reputation. He told me that night in our kitchen. Sometimes that means making hard choices. Hard for who? I asked him. He didn't answer. I could have fought it. I had the raw data, copied to a drive before they scrubbed the logs. But what would it have changed? I was one woman against the company that bore my own name. So I walked away. No press, no statement, no messy lawsuit. I left them the silence they wanted. But I kept everything that proved I was right. 10 years later, they were still building new wings on that same foundation, the one that required me to vanish for their version of the truth to stand. But facts don't disappear. They just wait. And in the dark, my truth waited too. After I left San Mateo, I stopped using my real name. The first year was spent off the grid, working short-term freelance gigs under burner aliases, sleeping in rented rooms, eating alone. I didn't talk about the breach. I didn't correct the record. I just disappeared. And then CipherNet found me. It started with a message, encrypted, unsigned, dropped into a server I'd built for a freelance client. We saw what you caught. We believe you. Do you want to do more? I ignored it at first, thought it was bait, but then came a follow-up, a chunk of leaked code tied to a foreign asset breach that hadn't hit the news yet. Along with it, a second message. Your signature's still in the packet headers. They weren't guessing. They knew who I was. CipherNet wasn't listed anywhere. No website, no building, no public address. It operated in a narrow sliver between defense and civilian infrastructure, a place where reputation didn't matter, only results. I said yes. They didn't need my resume. They gave me a new handle, SPN 32, a laptop, and a list of operations that weren't supposed to exist. And that was it. No press, no office politics. Just code and threat maps and missions that saved systems no one ever knew were under attack. I worked across 8 countries without ever leaving a single airport, took down ransomware cells, helped isolate a stolen AI model from propagating, stopped a false flag attack meant to trigger international sanctions. No one clapped. No one celebrated. But things got fixed. I learned to live inside silence, to let precision take the place of credit. I deleted old files, shaved my online presence to the bone, burned through 4 aliases, 2 apartments, and every remnant of the name Vale. And I was fine with it. I really was. Until the message came about Evan, it wasn't even direct, just a forwarded company-wide announcement posted to a private engineering channel I still lurked on. Evan Vale, lead engineer, effective May 1. A big smile. Balloons. Corporate praise in all caps. That headline should have meant nothing. But it stayed with me. It's not that I resented his success. Evan had always been smart. But there was something about it. The way they were handing him the keys to the very place I was erased from, as if none of it had ever happened. That was when I felt it. Something old and unfinished, rising back to the surface. I didn't need recognition. I didn't want revenge, but I needed to see it for myself. The system that swallowed me, and the brother who'd built his career on its ashes. I didn't knock. I didn't wait for lights or movement inside. I just placed the envelope on Evan's doorstep, tucked it under the corner of the welcome mat so the wind wouldn't carry away 10 years of silence. No return address, no note, just a matte black USB drive inside a nondescript envelope, wrapped in a folded page of security logs that had never been made public. The real logs. I stood there for a second, staring at the door I hadn't walked through in a decade. The place hadn't changed much. Neat garden beds, same gray trim, one of our mom's old ceramic planters still sitting in the corner with its paint peeling off. I didn't hate him. That wasn't what this was about. Evan had been 19 when the breach happened, a college intern still running test scripts and pretending he knew more than he did. He hadn't buried me, but he'd never asked questions either. And maybe that was the part that always sat the worst. How easy it had been for him to believe the version of me our father had offered. The USB drive held the original chain of intrusion events, time-stamped, unedited. It showed my access alerts, the ignored escalation tickets, the altered metadata. But most of all, it showed who scrubbed the trail. Gareth Vale, his own father. My own father. He'd authorized the deletion of the alert sequence and approved the final redacted summary. The edits were traced directly to his system ID. I'd been holding on to that proof for 10 years, not to win, but to wait. I wanted Evan to know what actually happened, not so he'd hate Gareth, but so he'd stop worshiping the man who'd built his legacy on silence. I didn't wait for a reaction. I didn't want one. Some truths aren't meant to be shouted, some are meant to be placed in your hands so you can feel the weight for yourself. By the time he found it, I was already gone. Halfway across town, sitting in a corner booth at a 24-hour diner that didn't care who I was or who I used to be. I stirred my coffee, watched the rain start up again, and thought, let him decide what to do with the truth. My job was just to give it back. He didn't text first, he didn't call, he just showed up, fist pounding against the apartment door like he had every right to be there. I opened it slowly. Evan stood in the hallway, his tie askew, breath shallow, eyes wide with something between rage and disbelief. You left it on my porch, he said. You didn't even say a word. You just dropped it off like it was nothing. I stepped aside without answering. He walked in like the place owed him something. You knew, he said, voice trembling now. You knew for 10 years and you let me believe it was true. That you lost it. That you blew the project. That Dad saved us from... He stopped short, hands on his hips. God, Adira. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Did you ever ask? He blinked. What? Did you ever ask me, once, what really happened? His jaw clenched. I was 19. I trusted Dad. Exactly. He stared at the floor. His shoulders looked heavier than I remembered. He told us you were unstable, that you refused to follow protocol, that you'd compromised the entire simulation. And you believed him. I was a kid. You were an intern at a tech company, I said calmly. You knew how systems work. You knew how logs work. You could have looked. You just didn't. Evan didn't answer right away. He walked over to the window and stared out into the dark parking lot, his breath fogging the glass. You left, he finally said. You didn't defend yourself. You just vanished. What was I supposed to think? That I was tired of explaining myself to people who only saw what they were told to see. He turned slowly, the tension bleeding out of his shoulders. It was him, all of it. He edited the reports. I nodded. And you've known this whole time? Yes. He swallowed hard. Why now? Why give it to me? Because you needed to know who you're following, I said, before you end up building your career on the same kind of silence. He looked down at the floor. I don't know what to do with this. You don't have to decide tonight. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't cold. Before he left, he turned at the door, his voice quieter now. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I looked him in the eye. You wouldn't have listened. He nodded slowly. You're probably right. He lingered a second longer, then stepped into the hallway. Evan, I said before he could leave. He glanced back. Start by not pretending anymore. Then I shut the door, and for the first time in years, I felt the lock click for me. Not against me. I hadn't used the root key in years. It was something I'd kept locked away, fragmented across 3 encrypted volumes and a disconnected drive buried under a floorboard in my storage unit. I told myself I was done with ghosts. But ghosts have a way of following you, especially when they wear ties and shake hands at board meetings. I pulled the drives together on a fresh laptop and fired up the CipherNet tools. Off network, air-gapped, silent. No pings, no signals. I wasn't here to start a war, just to finish something. I traced it backward. Not the breach. That part I already knew. I wanted the cleanup trail. Who had done the redaction? Who had signed the internal security memo that made me a cautionary tale? The data was buried deeper than I expected. Not erased, just sealed. Buried under executive privilege tokens that hadn't been touched in years. But CipherNet taught me patience. There's no door that doesn't open if you understand the hinges. Gareth's fingerprints were all over it. The report edits, the scrubbed audit trails. His login credentials appeared in the session logs 2 hours before the breach summary was finalized, exactly when the unstable behavior phrasing was inserted. But there was one name I didn't expect to see. Markell. Professor Anthony Markell, the same man who locked eyes with me on that stage like he was trying to rewrite history with one silent gesture. He hadn't just reviewed the final version, he had countersigned it. His credentials were linked to the sign-off line, alongside Gareth's. I stared at the screen for a long time. Markell had been more than a mentor. When I was 23 and full of imposter syndrome, he was the one who told me I belonged in rooms where no one looked like me. He got me hired, got me promoted, and when I fell, he stayed quiet. Now I understood the look on his face that day in the auditorium. The pause, the weight of it. That wasn't just recognition, it was regret. He couldn't take back the years I lost, but he could make a gesture, public, irreversible. a nod in front of a room full of people that said, I know, and I was part of it. I leaned back in my chair, screen still glowing. My hands were cold. This wasn't just about Gareth anymore. There was a network behind my erasure. Silent men, complicit choices. And if I was going to confront it, I had to start with the people who signed my silence into record. The nod had been Markel's apology. But apologies didn't undo damage, and I had no intention of letting this rot stay buried. Not anymore. The dinner was Evan's idea. He called it a step toward healing. I didn't believe in healing over salmon fillets, but I showed up anyway. The table was set for 4. Gareth at the head, Helena beside him. Evan poured wine like it was just another family meal. Like this wasn't a ticking bomb with cloth napkins and candles. Glad you both came, he said, voice tight. We need to talk. Gareth raised an eyebrow. That much is clear. I didn't say anything. I waited. I wasn't here for his performance. Evan sat down and pulled out his phone, unlocking the screen with a slow breath. I reported the altered breach file to the board. Silence. What the hell are you talking about? Gareth asked. Evan set the phone down. The falsified report. The one that ruined Adira's career. Helena flinched. Gareth didn't. That report was signed off by the entire response committee, Gareth said calmly. It was a consensus decision. I wasn't the only one involved. But you were the one who changed the logs, Evan said. I checked the server logs myself. Your credentials, your timestamp. The redaction edits came from your terminal. That information is confidential. No, I interrupted. It was buried, not protected. There's a difference. Gareth's jaw twitched. You think bringing this to the board fixes something? You don't understand the pressure we were under. Investors were watching. Media had gotten wind of the breach. If we'd admitted that an internal engineer caught it before it happened, the liability fallout would have destroyed us. You sacrificed her to protect the company, Evan said. Gareth didn't deny it. I protected this family, he said instead. I made sure our name didn't go down in flames. You didn't protect me, I said. My voice was even. You erased me. Gareth leaned back in his chair. You were emotional. You refused to follow protocol. I followed every protocol. The problem wasn't the breach. It was who caught it, and you decided my credibility was the easiest thing to cut. Helena finally spoke. Her voice was soft but firm. He told me if I defended you publicly, I'd be cut off. No more board seat, no more access. I didn't know what to do. I turned toward her. So you stayed quiet. Tears rimmed her eyes. I thought silence would keep the peace. I was wrong. Evan looked between us all. I wanted this dinner to be a chance to move forward. But if that's going to happen, it starts with the truth. All of it. Gareth pushed back from the table. You think the board's going to thank you for opening this up again? You're naive. Evan stood. I think they deserve to know what kind of legacy they've inherited. For a moment, no one moved. Then Gareth walked out without another word, his footsteps sharp against the hardwood. Helena remained seated, staring at her plate like it might speak for her. I stood, folded my napkin, and turned to Evan. That was the first honest conversation this family's ever had, I said. He nodded. It won't be the last. It was buried beneath a stack of winter blankets, inside a cedar chest in the corner of my old childhood room. I hadn't planned to go back there. The house was quiet. Gareth had moved into a condo across town. Helena had stayed behind. She said she liked the quiet. I think she just didn't know where else to go. I came by to drop off a document Evan needed for the inquiry. Helena offered tea like nothing had changed. Before I left, I walked down the hallway and opened the door to my old room. It smelled like dust and pine and something that hadn't been touched in years. The bookshelves were still full. My bed was still made with the same faded blue quilt, and the chest was still there, just like I remembered, scratched and worn and heavy with forgotten things. I opened it without thinking, just wanting a moment of something that hadn't been poisoned by memory. Underneath a stack of photo albums, I found a cassette tape in a paper sleeve. My name was written on it in black ink, just Adira. I turned it over in my hands, heart knocking against my ribs. No label, no date. I found an old Walkman in the bottom drawer, the kind we used when I was a teenager. Miraculously, it still worked. I put the headphones on and pressed play. The tape clicked, hissed, then my mother's voice filled my ears. I'm sorry, I don't know if you'll ever hear this, but I need to say it anyway. I sat down hard on the bed. I begged him to reconsider, Adira. I told him what he was doing was wrong. But he said you were emotional, that you'd ruin the company's credibility, and I didn't know how to fight that. I was afraid of losing everything. I should have spoken up. I should have stood beside you. She paused. I could hear her swallow, hear the tremble in her breath. You deserved better than silence. You deserved a mother who stood up for you. I hope someday you'll understand why I couldn't, and I hope someday you'll forgive me. The tape ended. Just static after that. I sat there for a long time. It didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the years of absence or the moments I begged for even a sliver of her voice. But it gave me something else. Something I hadn't let myself hope for. Not indifference. Not betrayal. Fear. Regret. Love that wasn't strong enough back then, but maybe meant something now. I slid the tape back into its sleeve and tucked it beside my documents. Another piece of the truth. Another thread I refused to let vanish. The offer came in a white envelope, hand-delivered by a company liaison who refused to make eye contact. Inside, a letter signed by ValeNet's interim board chair, formally inviting me to return to the company. They wanted to correct the record, reinstate my title, offer me a public commendation for my early detection of the breach. It was polished, formal, and full of language that screamed liability control. No apology, just cleanup. I stared at the letter a long time before folding it neatly and sliding it back into the envelope. They still didn't get it. You can't undo a decade with a staged photo op. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I already knew what mattered now, and it wasn't a title. That same week, I accepted a quiet offer from a cybersecurity initiative that trained first-generation college students. No PR, no ceremony, just a small team trying to teach kids how to break systems ethically. And more importantly, how to recognize when systems are built to lie. I gave them what I'd learned the hard way: how to read silence in the code, how to trace decision trails backwards, how to keep your principles sharper than your resume. It felt right, like something was finally turning forward. A few days after I started, a package showed up at my door. No return label, just a simple manila envelope with my name printed in block letters. Inside was a handwritten note from Evan. I used to think strength looked like control. Now I know it looks like you. Thanks for never yelling and for never disappearing entirely, even when you had every reason to. What you gave me, the truth, the time to figure it out, it changed everything. I'm trying to be better. There was no signature, just the letter and a simple USB drive. This one filled with his own compiled findings, proving the timeline of the cover-up. He'd presented it to the internal audit team and submitted his resignation from the project that Gareth once built. He was stepping away from the family name, on purpose. That night, I walked to the roof of my apartment building, sat on the ledge with a cup of mint tea, and watched the city lights flicker against the fog. I didn't need a press release. I didn't need a seat at the board table. The truth had already done its job. It unraveled the lie, and it left something stronger in its place. Not a redemption story, but a foundation. I was no longer a ghost. I was a guide. And maybe that was the quietest, strongest kind of vindication there was. It came in a plain black box, no label, no sender. Just a tight strip of security tape across the seal and a single word, handwritten in silver ink across the lid. Delivered. I opened it on my kitchen table, half expecting some forgotten file from CipherNet or maybe one final bureaucratic request from the board. What I found inside wasn't either. It was a silver badge. No name, no number, no department. Just a smooth metal surface shaped like a keyhole and the faint etching of a circuit pattern around the edge. It weighed more than I expected. Solid, cold, and completely untraceable. Beneath it, a folded card. No greeting, no signature. Just 5 words. Some systems still remember you. I stared at it for a long time, my fingers resting on the badge, thumb brushing the edge like it might reveal something more. But that was the point, wasn't it? There wouldn't be an announcement, no ceremony, no speech. This wasn't about repair or redemption. It was a recognition too quiet for headlines, one that slipped through back channels and landed exactly where it was meant to. A thank you, maybe, an acknowledgement, or maybe just someone within the machine signaling that the myth they built around me had finally collapsed under its own weight. I didn't display it. I didn't put it on a shelf or post a cryptic photo online. I wrapped it in cloth and tucked it into a drawer beside the tape from my mother and the drive that proved the truth. Not trophies, not weapons, just records of the fight. The next morning, I walked to the edge of the ValeNet campus, not through the front doors, not with a badge, just close enough to see the building one last time. I watched workers move in and out, executives with headsets, interns with company-branded backpacks. Life moved on, but something had shifted. I heard it in the way a group of engineers spoke quietly at a corner bench. My name not spoken, but clearly present. I saw it in a printed memo posted to a break room door, listing new integrity protocols with keywords I'd once flagged in my own reports. It was subtle, invisible to most, but not to me. They weren't erasing me anymore. They were rebuilding around what I'd exposed. I turned and walked away. No spotlight, no stage, just a quiet woman with steady steps, walking forward, leaving behind a legacy that didn't need a label to be real. They'd tried to bury the story. Instead, they turned it into something else. A whisper, a warning, a name that lived on in rooms I'd never enter again. And that was enough.